Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Live with Kellye and Ken show. I'm Kellye Testy, the president of the Law School Admission Council, and I'm here with my co-host, Ken Randall, from iLaw, and I thank you for joining us today. Ken, it's always good to be with you.
Thank you, Kellye, and you too. I know last month we celebrated our 2-year anniversary, so thanks for signing up with me for year number 3.
You bet. It's great to be here. And the topic we have today is one that I'm just so excited that we have an opportunity to explore. As all of you know, we're looking at envisioning legal ed post-COVID, and let's hope there is a post-COVID. I know all of us are getting really, great concern with the terrible situation that we continue to see all across the world in terms of battling COVID. And more than anything, we want to hope everyone stays safe and well and understand the devastation that this has brought in so many quarters. At the same time, as legal educators, any challenge that comes to us, we're doing our best to anticipate and think about what's that mean for the future and how do we go forward to continue to make legal education strong. And so Ken and I thought this would be a good opportunity to look at those issues. And we invited several of our colleagues, 3 deans, and also Bill Henderson, a professor and leading thinker in legal education, to talk about what we might be expecting as we all go forward together. So I want to say that, first of all, I want to give big thanks to the 3 deans who have joined us, because their leadership has been so valuable in navigating many challenges, and it will be so critical for us going forward. So I want to welcome first Marianne Bobinski, the Dean at Emory's Law School. Marianne, thanks for being with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure. And I also want to say a really warm welcome to Dean Camille Nelson, who joins us from Hawaii School of Law. Camille, it's so good to see you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Kellye. I appreciate you and Ken including me. It's great to be on the panel with these wonderful deans.
Thank you. And I also give a very warm welcome to Laura Rosenbury from Florida. And Laura, thanks for all of your leadership and for joining us for this program today.
Thank you.
I also want to let you know that we expect Bill Henderson to join us shortly. And as he does that, we'll bring him into the Q&A. The way that we're going to proceed today is I'm going to hand back to you, Ken, and Ken has some initial questions for our deans. And then we'll also be engaging with you, our audience. So please know that your questions are welcome in the Q&A. And as we cover a few topics to begin, I'll be drawing from those and bringing those into the discussion. So again, with great thanks to the 3 deans for joining us, Ken, I'm going to hand back to you to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Kellye, and thank you, deans, for being with us. And we appreciate the audience. And again, we first hope everybody is doing well. As I do in every program, or I have been since March, our thanks go to Kellye Testy and LSAC for the tremendous things you've done. Creativity, nimbleness, flexibility in making the LSAC even more inclusive during the time of COVID. Our goal today is, as Kellye said, to really think strategically and really in terms of a vision for legal education when things return to a more normal period. Working with deans and associate deans the last several months, everybody is so busy with the day-to-day operations. People are busier than ever. It feels like a very heavy operations time, and then most universities are suffering from some fiscal issues, which then also are trickling into the law schools. So you're not only dealing with how do we arrange classes, but how do we handle our budget. So Kellye and I thought that, again, with great salute to legal ed for being so nimble. What will legal ed look like, say, in fall 21 or even in 22 whenever things get back to normal? So, Dean Nelson, I'm going to start with you and ask you the question. If you could name 1 or 2 things that you think are sort of the best things that have come out of COVID, and of course, recognizing that we all wish we were not in this situation, this tragic situation, but are there 1 or 2 things that you say, going forward, we really can take with us to when law school normalizes? I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to be respectful to not be, making noise. So I'm so sorry about that. But if I could think about positives that come out of this and hopefully aspire to something better. One, I would think we have to be so intentional now about how we fortify and support our communities. And I think the conversation around wellness is becoming a part of the fabric of many schools, and the connection between physical, obviously with a pandemic, and mental health, let alone sort of spiritual anchoring, whatever that means, right? Something larger than ourselves is one way to think about it. I think that has to continue, I would hope, to be a part of how we engage each other. So I hope some positive sort of sense of community building and interconnectedness replaces what can be atomistic, individualistic tendencies in many places. I think that the twin pillars of disease and dis-ease that have been surfaced between frankly, the concerns around racism in our country and its underpinning in terms of heightened vulnerability during the pandemic has led us to also many leaders, administrators, faculty think about how we go forward with anti-racist curricula and think about what that means to be, an anti-racist, culturally competent, intersectionally minded leader as well, right? So I think these conversations are hopefully no longer being sidelined in a way that would prevent us from seeing that all of these conversations have to be part of how we do better. Climate justice being another concern, right? So how do we move these questions from the margins to the center would be, I hope, part of what we see as we all look at our curriculum and hopefully go into hiring at some point. And those are some of the opportunities in any event that I see. And of course, technology. I mean, I think there's a certain liberation from the mentality that, distance ed is in some way something that we should not be centering. And online ed and sort of what does our virtual strategy look like has to be part of how we go forward. And I'll stop there.
Wow, wonderful beginning. Great and important themes. Thanks, Camille. And I do want to see the viewers have seen that Professor Henderson has joined us from University of Indiana. And Bill, great to have you with us. And you've been introduced, and good to have you here with us.
Sorry for the delay.
No, good to have you. Dean Bobinski, picking up on what Dean Nelson said, what might be some positive takeaways, things that we've learned, lessons that actually will improve legal education on a going forward basis?
Well, thank you. First, I would just say I really think Dean Nelson's comments were just tremendous, and their insightfulness on some very important aspects of what we are learning from the world around us and what we need to have in mind moving forward. I'll add maybe just two additional points, somewhat disparate points. First is a comment I think that builds on what's already been said, which looks at the importance of this moment. We've just heard about how law schools may need to focus on anti-racist curriculum, on different types of social justice and environmental justice. I think pulling back from that, it's also a really important time to think about why it is that students are drawn to law school and the lessons in the world all around us about the importance of law, the importance of legal education, and the importance of access to legal education to ensure justice all across our society. And certainly the students who've been drawn to study today in the world that we're facing, pandemic and the various climate challenges and rule of law challenges, all the things that we have in mind, are students who've shown this tremendous dedication and an understanding of the importance of legal education. And I hope that that understanding is with us moving forward, but without the daily challenges and issues that have brought it to the fore. Second point I guess I would make just picks up on the comment about technology, and to say that we could never have imagined such an enormous transformation in law school teaching. And you referred to the nimbleness of law schools over the past few months. To think that we would go from a world where relatively few law school faculty members had ever taught remotely to one where, and now I will make a joke, virtually all had. Okay, not much of a joke, but virtually all law professors now have taught using technology, taught remotely. And just that sea change, which we never could have anticipated, will naturally change how we think about legal education moving forward. It hasn't been full immersion in distance learning. It's been about, for many people, teaching via Zoom in a very similar way to how they might have taught in a class. But still, it's a massive transformation of the experience of law professors that I think we'll have a chance to talk about how it may play out in curricula and law schools moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And again, so many important themes there. Just quickly on the distance side, and we'll return to it. As you know, we founded something called iLaw Distance Education 7 years ago. And I remember when we first started calling on law schools and deans, and people were looking at me and think no person in his right mind would start this thing called iLaw. And it's just really interesting to see law schools totally online at this point. Dean Rosenbury, I'm going to pick up on a word that Dean Nelson used, which was liberate. Is there anything like that you can think about that your faculty has been doing this year that in a sense you've now had the freedom to do something that, maybe in your free moments over the last couple of years, you said, boy, I wish we were doing this, or why aren't we doing this, or everybody in the right mind? Are there some things that you've really been more liberated to do during the closures?
Absolutely. I think many of our faculty members have been highly skeptical about online legal education, and the rapid change to 100% online in March led to some surprises, also complaints, but some pleasant surprises with respect to what can be achieved online, whether it be in a synchronous fashion or an asynchronous fashion. And what's been even more exciting for me to see is, we went from a mindset of 100% in person rapidly to 100% online. And now this semester, we're doing all of our courses in a hybrid or high flex fashion, which means we have some students in the room and other students participating remotely. And it would have taken us years to get to that high flex format. But for COVID. Now, of course, I wish COVID had not happened, but it has led to a rapid transformation of how we're delivering our courses, which lead to some interesting possibilities for our students going forward. We've always been somewhat limited by our location in a small college town. It's great because there are few distractions. You can just focus on law school, but it's hard to get those part-time jobs that you might want to get to help a student's professional development. Now we could have students who are working part-time in Miami or Atlanta or New York, DC, and then taking their classes remotely the other 20 to 30 hours a week. And that is a really exciting possibility should the ABA permit that type of flexibility going forward.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thanks, Laura. We're going to return to online. I do want to come to Bill Henderson. Bill, for many years, while they were keeping such tallies, you were always voted as the most influential person in legal education. You've spoken about the interface between the profession, changes in the profession, interdisciplinary ways that business people, lawyers, innovators work together. What are the best ways that legal education can evolve, not just this year where we've been trying to cover things, but if you were building a curriculum for 2022 and beyond to reflect the changes in the profession?
So, well, thanks, Ken, and thanks, Kellye, for having me. I really appreciate being included in this illustrious group. I think the curriculum that we should be migrating toward is the stuff that I'm involved in with the Institute for the Future of Law Practice, and kind of takes a page from, Ken, with what you've done at iLaw. Is this picks up on some of the research that came out of the a report I did for the California Bar, where they asked me to do a landscape study. And I said that the big issue that's going on, if you look for the seismic explanation for what's going on with the profession, it says that the legal profession, just like higher ed, just like the medical profession, just like government services, suffers what the economists call cost disease, which means that the price goes up even though we don't have any underlying productivity enhancements. And this distortion means, or this means that the cost disease type parts of our economy place an ever greater share, a claim on consumers' wallet share. And for healthcare, we just pay more. Our employer pays more. For government services, the taxes go up. For higher ed, we go greater into debt to do it, but we can see for consumers and legal services, they've been foregoing legal services and the gaps being filled by things like LegalZoom or basically more self-represented litigation. The commercial sector, the business organizational clients continue to grow here, but more and more our students are going and earning their living basically serving corporations in the personal services sphere has atrophied. And I think that the key touchstone for what the legal education needs to do is to enable, embrace the know-how of one-to-many legal technologies. And this is teaching students to think through how to redesign court systems so that we don't necessarily need to have two old school represented lawyers for cases that are worth $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. 3 out of every 4 cases in state court are self-represented, and we need to think through how those issues get resolved, because they're just not worth it to apply what we teach in law school, the process that we teach in law school, and apply it to those kind of controversies. And at the same time, you see big corporations blanching at the high cost of legal services, and they're bringing more and more work in-house, and it's led to the rise of the legal operations movement, which is applying technology, process, data, design principles, business operations, the practice of law. Just the other day at Southern Law School, I'm teaching a course there called Special Problems in Commercial Law, which is enabled by this virtual environment, and it's an iFlip faculty course taught through Southern University Law Center. We spent an hour on the deputy general counsel of a technology company. They do about $500 million a year in software as a subscription sales to enterprises, and just going over his CLM system, his contract lifecycle management system, and the choices that he made here. I couldn't believe that my students were getting that exposure to basically how these in-house lawyers are enabling the speeding up of the practice of law and making the risk decisions and the contracts transparent to the lawyers. And we were able to get that lawyer to show up, and he was able to walk us through a system. It was enabled by this technology. But these types of courses, in my view, really require an immersion of the profession, or of the legal academy, into what's going on at the cutting edge of modern law practice. And frankly, I don't think that 200 law schools can do that. You hire one person and they're supposed to survey what's going on in this incredibly complex landscape. I think that we view it at the Institute for the Future of Law Practice as building up modular curricula that we can make available to all 200 law schools, because frankly, this is so complicated. And my colleagues that teach at law school are subject matter experts in substantive law. This is really about service delivery, and it's what's driving the cost disease. We need to focus on productivity enhancements. Otherwise, the entire profession suffers as a result here. And I really don't think that every law school should try and do that. We still need to build out the body of knowledge. I'll just say one thing to kind of make it simple. 100 years ago, we rationalized substantive law by entering into the restatement movement, and the American Law Institute was born. And 100 years later, we're still collecting the dividends of black letter law, which emerged from the restatement movement, and it harmonized and simplified this incredible amount of complexity. We need to do the same thing for one-to-many that we did for one-to-one consultative services with the restatement movement. The profession needs to come together to solve this problem, and to do it one by one by faculty to try and stand up this kind of curriculum, it won't work. It's too complicated a problem.
Thanks, Bill. Laura, only because on my screen you're right above Bill and you've been nodding your head, I'm going to see what you want to add to Bill's comments.
Well, absolutely. I can't speak to all of the specifics that Bill highlighted, but anyone who wants to learn more about this should read various things Bill has written over the past 5 to 7 years. This is by no means new, but COVID has accelerated the transformation of the legal profession that was already underway because of market pressures as well as technological innovation. And even though this was already underway, lawyers, like law professors, are often slow to change, cautious about change, and COVID forced the change. If you talk to the alumni of our law schools, they are practicing law in a fundamentally different way now than they did in March. And to the extent we are preparing students for the practice of law, we have to change our curriculum or shape our curriculum to reflect this new reality. And some of it is absolutely in the realm of how we deliver legal services, the one-to-many movement that Bill was talking about. But it's also true that most likely from here on out, mediations will be done remotely, arbitrations remotely. We're having jury trials now remotely in Florida. Negotiations are going to be done remotely. And we need to make sure our students have the tech competency to function in this new world. The iFlip movement is a way to make sure students have a very high level of tech competence, but all of our students are going to need to have some basic level of tech competence in order to survive. We need to redefine what we mean by legal skills, because it's not going to go back to the pre-COVID days.
Thank you. I want to go, Marianne, you mentioned technology. Of course, Bill and Laura have been talking about technology. Normally in law schools, when we talk about technology, we think about education as, in a sense, being separate from the course itself, right? Like the way the ABA has regulated it, it counts minutes, right? You can, starting 2002, you can do 11 credits online. We're up to, 33 credits online, but it's just a matter of quantifying how many credits. So, I mean, first, what are the shortcomings of that approach? And then secondly, again, we really think about technology in terms of like a delivery platform for faculty, but divorced from the, how we practice law and how we really think about representing people today.
Well, it's a big question there with has numerous subparts. I'll pick up on one aspect, which is just the structure of accreditation and the tremendous challenges that accreditors were already facing pre-COVID. As they try and map their mission of, in the case of the ABA, ensuring that law schools are maintaining a rigorous program of legal education that prepares graduates to enter the profession and serve clients, to map that mission against what evidence do we have about how legal education works. What is required from a substantive standpoint? What's the knowledge, skills, values, ethics that need to be part of the law school experience? And then how should it be delivered? And as you've pointed out, how it should be delivered was subject to specific numbers of limits in terms of number of hours. And the question from an accreditation standpoint is, if your mission is here and your values are here and what you're trying to achieve, how do you actually continue to justify a minute-based or delivery model-based form of regulation in a world where there's increasing evidence about the effectiveness of alternate delivery systems, whether or not it's synchronous distance learning or asynchronous distance learning. And so from a standpoint of accreditation, the mounting evidence before COVID, combined with now the fact that so much of legal education has been delivered across the board using this alternate delivery methods, I think will put tremendous pressure on the traditional ways of approaching the accreditation problem. And this doesn't even touch something which is also out there, which is the direct assessment program movement and the idea of moving away from counting minutes and hours in the classroom to directly measuring competencies, which if you combine that with the technology capacity for delivering legal education could fundamentally transform at least parts of how the legal education is delivered moving forward.
So Mary, as we think about innovation, we sometimes think about what you have to ask permission to do as opposed to what you can do without asking permission and the limitations. Do you think that the logical, just on what we used to call the old standard 306, which regulated distance ed in legal ed, will that logically then disappear as of fall 22 and the ABA will extend the kind of the liberation of using the platform of choice?
I was hoping you turned to other people for the prediction of what the ABA would do. And
Sure
I would
do.
leave myself safely in the world where I'm talking about the incredible pressure on the ABA, given its mission to move away from certain artificial numerical caps and things like that, and focus on what the evidence is about what legal education needs to deliver and the different ways in which that can be delivered effectively. And so certainly looking at those pressures and the experience that we've had in the COVID pandemic, you'd say that there's a likelihood that the ABA might move away from those more historic approaches.
Yeah, thank you. Camille, we've talked about this in the past, but legal education, largely has been a 1 degree shop, right? We largely produce JDs. We know in some states like Kelly's old state of Washington, we have limited liability legal technicians in some areas. Law schools have started to teach JMs and more LLMs, although part of that really has been, I think, revenue driven and budget driven as we face the downturn in applications. But as a dean looking forward, how do you think about the degrees or the types of education other than just the JD that your law school offers?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it connects somewhat with what both Bill and Marianne and certainly Laura were saying. And part of this is if we think, instead of thinking incrementally year over year, which is I think so much of how we are incentivized to think by our various accreditors and ranking systems, and there are incremental tweaks here and there, we're all sort of juggling to try to figure that out and incremental tweaks there. But if we were to say, okay, it's 2075, what does this look like? Right? I certainly would hope that law schools would, like most schools, be far more connected with those they are trying to serve, both in their communities, right? Whatever that means for you, your community, where you're situated, but also in terms of the professions and the career opportunities that you're trying to drive. And part of that then backs me into designing the degrees, right? So I think, clearly, where we all have JDs, LLMs, whatever, JD equivalents and other advanced degrees in law, but we certainly could push into the college university space as we know it. I frankly think we also have to start thinking intentionally, given what we know about when young people start to think about professional opportunities, law school in particular, post middle school, like how do we engage with K through 12? I'm not saying that's for profit, but what does that mean as we think about our profession going out? I also think it means, in addition to LLMs and SJDs, which I concede your point around revenue enhancement often, but what does that mean if those span out laterally across the sort of community, the university and externally in terms of interdisciplinarity, right? Why is it that, how do we engage, let's put it this way, around our business curricula with business schools, right? How do we engage around our criminal legal system courses with criminologists, sociologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists, and others who have something to say, right? How do we engage with urban planners, architects around our real estate planning? So I think we can recognize, many of us, that so many of these walls are sort of like boundaries that protect our disciplines as opposed to enhance our students' learning opportunities. Right? They are discipline specific, and the barriers are there partly to protect the professions, but they're also there because they've been regulated in a way that creates them, right? Like our accreditors are also discipline specific, right? The med schools have different accreditors and different standards, the B schools, business schools. So, I wonder how much more porous these conversations will be laterally so we can design forward and into our pipeline with greater creativity and innovation. I think part of the challenges that Bill's been articulating is because we're all, frankly, doing workarounds and we're like confined to like our existing ways of thinking, but we're building and tacking on as opposed to thinking, okay, what does this look like 5 decades out, right? And what would we do if we had our druthers to recreate the systems? And those are just some thoughts, and perhaps they're fanciful, but I think they would better serve our students in terms of what they actually encounter in the real world, all right? Someone doesn't walk in and say, I'm a real estate deal, and not, tether to so many other conversations that are relevant to the deal.
Yeah, I love you use the term workaround because, often when you're really thinking about something that really does shift, it starts as a series of, in a sense, aberrations or, small incremental changes. So, I want to think in terms again of, how do you break through some of those walls? And Laura, we can think about the limitations of distance ed based on, you can have X number of credits, which is largely how we thought about this. But how about, you mentioned being in Gainesville. Another area where we know that the accreditors really put limitations on legal education is on physical location, right? I mean, I think this is still right. You can't have a law school in another country. I think that's still correct. If you want to have a branch operation, you essentially need to set it up. So you're in Gainesville, you want to set one up in where Miami, Tallahassee, Los Angeles, you essentially have to recreate a faculty and a physical library. So, if you're recommending changes in that part of the accreditation standards, what are you prescribing going forward?
Right. I think our understanding of location is rapidly shifting. We have about 600 students on our campus right now in Gainesville, but we have another 350 who are participating in our courses from all over the world, including like in China. And, even though they're doing synchronous participation, they're doing it in the middle of the night. So we have become more global and national by chance because of the pandemic, and it would be really disappointing if we had to give up this new understanding of our national and global community in order to comply with the ABA standards. I think, I went through the standards to think about what areas besides 306 might be changed or should be changed because of COVID. And first, when they talk about proper professional and ethical responsibilities and, 302, I think now you would say proper professional and ethical responsibilities include being able to remotely connect with clients and to maintain confidentiality within that remote environment. When we talk about professional skills, as I mentioned before, technology now has to be at the forefront of our professional skills conception. I think we could really think differently about experiential learning. We could really think differently about international study. We could also think differently about assessment. So much of our assessment has been based on individual performance. And as we know, lawyers primarily partner with clients to solve problems. And they do that by working in interdisciplinary teams, as Camille emphasized. And we need to allow for more interaction between our students and students in engineering, the medical school, the business school, to together work on projects like they would in the real world. And the virtual connective tools that we are now used to and are improving and developing make that possible, not just across our campus, but across the world. And that is what's really exciting about this moment, if we can look beyond the traditional standards to think about what our students will need to be successful lawyers in the future.
Right. So we need I don't know if the ABA has one, we need a task force on the changes we need to make for the standards, right? Hey, Bill, I know you think often in big picture ways that are stimulating all of us. One of the most difficult things for deans and academic leaders today is that people actually have less time than ever to think about these things. I mean, what I've seen happen at campuses across the country is that rather than think strategically about the paradigm shift, there's less money, there's more meetings, there's more heavy operational issues. And of course, when you're dealing with a pandemic, you do have some really serious day-to-day, I mean, it's a heavy ops time. So when you think about strategy generally, but even some of the things that you're talking about of interfacing with the profession, what is the best pathway to be able to think strategically as an academic leader when you have more challenges than ever?
That's a really great question, Ken. And I worry about that issue all the time. not to be critical of my own school because I'm not, but it's in the middle of September. We were basically finalizing the winter semester, the next semester, and there's just almost no time to think about something that's going to be very substantive. And I will give my school an A+ for how they've handled the COVID pandemic in terms of communication with students and faculty, and coming up with creative workarounds here. But that's pretty much all we have. We don't have the bandwidth to think through these bigger picture issues. And frankly, the kind of complexity that I encounter in my research that's going on in the practice of law here is mind-bogglingly complex. I sometimes say that the legal tech movement is like Detroit in 1905 here. Everybody's right that cars are the future. They're wrong. It's going to be there. They're going to be manufacturing the car. There's going to be massive amounts of roll-ups and consolidations that have to happen to enable this kind of one-to-many. And I again, kind of returning to this idea of a kind of American Law Institute redux. I don't see any way of doing this without leadership that spans the entire profession and brings in the judiciary and brings in the practicing bar. When we got the American Law Institute off the ground here, we had, the idea of these kind of lawyer statesmen. Elijah Root was the guy who was kind of carrying the standard bearer for it. He happened to be affiliated with the Carnegie Foundation. He got $1 million to kind of get this off the ground. And there's lots of quotes in the law review saying that never before has the profession from the 50 states or not the 50 states, there wasn't 50 states at the time here, the several states been come together to work on something that was in the collective good. We need to think in that kind of Manhattan Project type way here, because your line faculty person is very good at their substantive area here, but they have very little appreciation for what's going on in the broader practice. You talk to a state Supreme Court judge, they have no idea really what's going on behind their own docket, by their own admission. And we really need to give the best, a group of people, the white space to reconceptualize it and solve it on behalf of the rest of us. And we could just plug into it as a central facility. I really think that this idea that we're going to solve it through competition is really dangerous because the broader society depends upon us to get these things solved here. And I just think that if we try and do it through competition, all of society is going to suffer.
Thanks, Bill. A couple more questions, panelists, and then I do want to turn it over to my co-host, Kellye. So, Marianne and Camille, you are on different campuses, right? Different parts of the country, one private, one public. Marianne, starting with you, what kind of permission do you need from the university to try new things? What I see happening is that universities are making more demands on law schools today, at a time when you probably need the most freedom. So what has to happen in terms of a university law school relationship to liberate schools to be able to make some of the kinds of changes we're talking about?
Well, great question. I mean, I think for Emory, the law school has had this kind of tradition of being creative and entrepreneurial and nimble and trying to think about its academic programs and create some of the new degree programs that you referred to earlier, the JM program, to have different types of programs, an MCL program for foreign trained lawyers. So lots of different innovation actually that has been fostered within the university. And so at the front end, and of course I'll send this to our provost later, the front end I'd have great praise for the university and its support. But I would say that there are structural impediments to thinking creatively, and we talked about this, how much gets taken up with the day-to-day, with the challenges of annual sort of recruitment cycles and faculty hiring cycles and things like that. And when you think about what's going to be the forward-looking impact of COVID, you have to say, well, what are these barriers and how can we address them? And so within our school, actually the greatest innovation and understanding of distance learning came from faculty members who had a strong association with these alternate non-JD degree programs. So Rebecca Purdom, who you and I talked about earlier, is just a tremendous force and a leader for helping our faculty in the JD curriculum think about how to teach in the COVID era. So every school needs to think about, well, who are the resources who can help think creatively? How can we think and learn from different degree programs and think about fundamentally restructuring or looking at the JD program. For us, a real challenge is the lack of instructional designers. So we have expertise within our faculty, but we haven't had the impetus and the funding and the support to have instructional design expertise right within the faculty. There's the question about funding, how we'll fund innovation. And we're in the middle of a strategic planning process, and we have the opportunity to access funds associated with strategic planning from the university to be able to invest, but we have to see, well, where's the priority for curricular innovation over other types of innovation? And I want to not take up too much time, but I'd say that, there are great strengths of universities looking at law schools and saying these are tremendously important because of the role they play in the community, because of the promotion of justice, because of the way in which they help the university as a whole, a willingness to invest in creativity, but just these sort of little pieces that are necessary to pull together a full reconceptualization of the JD curriculum that takes into account the latest educational evidence, latest projects like the best practices project that you and Rebecca and others are working on, and really thinks about how to change the JD curriculum moving forward. So apologies for the long answer.
Great insights. Thank you. And Camille, I'll turn to you. You're a senior dean. You've deaned at several schools. You're at a new school. Are there resources or changes in relationship when it comes to the university that you need, or do you have internal resources that you need at the law school, really to think about innovation and strategy?
Yeah, I think so much of this is entirely resource driven, and certainly the pandemic has disparately impacted so many of the schools that were already sort of like not resource rich, let's put it that way. And I also think that one of the things that just having been at different schools is very different is what are the internal sort of resources in terms of talent pool, infrastructure, existing technology, what those look like really do prevent, hinder, boost, permit the possibility of innovation and innovation quickly or innovation being iterative. And so I think when you come and you do your SWOT analysis and you're coming in, so much of it is so local, right? And I want to think about the possibilities for innovation as being local, but also being mission driven, right? And I increasingly think that there will be market differentiation. We all can't be everything to everybody in the same way. Let's put it that way. And I think to be forced in some cases because of the ways our external systems work, whether they're reporting agencies, rankings agencies, accreditors, sort of ask the same questions in the exact same way of everybody. And it's not organic nor focus on what schools, especially schools within universities, say they are trying to do to best serve their states or their local communities. And at some point that has to shake out, like, how are you serving your mission?
Right.
Who do you say you are? We're not telling you who you are, but who do you say you are, and how are you actually actuating that mission? I think should be part of what we're talking about here. Or else, frankly, I think we do a disservice by simply trying to replicate. It's the analog to equality versus equity, right? So I just want to put that out there as well, because I do think resources and mission have to be part of this critical interrogation.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Again, it comes back to geography and technology, and you don't just need multiple schools in a state just because that's the only way people get to go to law school. Yeah. Kellye, let me turn it over to you. I know you have some good questions for the panelists.
Sure, Ken, glad to do that. And let me remind our audience, if you have a specific question, feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we'll be happy to draw from those as we have 10 or 15 minutes here left. One question that I actually got texted to me is really for Professor Henderson, and so let me start there. And that is that you mentioned, Bill, and I agree with you that the competition itself is not likely to solve the issues we have. In fact, it may be exacerbating them in some ways. What steps might lead us to a more cooperative or place where we could make some progress in a way that might actually move the needle in the way that we're all discussing here?
Well, I'd like to think that, if you go back to say 50 or 75 years or some, the founding of LSAC, which was there to solve a problem of admissions, and all law schools funded it, became members. Access Lex, which was your kind of spin-off, solved the financing problem. NELP solved a placement problem here. We need the same thing to solve a curricular problem, especially for this, I think, this kind of e-learning. The idea that, Ken's company, iLaw, is based upon this premise that you could scale expertise in different parts of the law school, catalog, and it's a fiscal saver for any school that uses iLaw. But we can take it to the next level and create modular education that schools can access for a price that's probably less than an adjunct, and can actually deliver the kind of learning that all schools can be brought up to speed to very, very quickly. And but it requires leadership at the ALS level, at the ABA level. It requires some visionary leadership. Let's get it together, and it requires some financing. Maybe we can do it through a foundation, but it requires people to say, we can't do this on our own here. And I know everybody's busy, but we need to have we need to empower kind of a super delegation that cuts across legal academy, knits in the profession, knits in the judiciary, I believe, and with the idea that to think through the 3.0 era we're entering.
Yeah, very helpful. And I sure hope we can, because one of the things I'm seeing.
By the way, I got that idea from you. I know that you said something very similar to me about 3 years ago, and I just agree with it. So.
All right. Well, I can't argue with that then, but I hope it happens. We're seeing so much demand coming with interest in law school. Yeah. The candidate volumes are very high right now, and I think trying to provide some of those methodologies will really be useful. One of the things I'd like to do in the time we have remaining is that, having such great thinkers with us today, I want to, we want to really give the deans a chance to make some, kind of closing comments about things that they'd really like to see that we haven't covered yet. So I want to invite that for you, deans, in just a minute to so that rather than us channeling everything you're talking about, you can express some of the ideas that you have that you'd like to see move forward. As we do that, one of the other questions that's come in is just about how this discussion we're having links to employment opportunities, because after all, our graduates are looking for how does their education position them. And so, Laura, I might start with you if I could, and ask you also just to include in your remarks anything about the link to employment that strikes you as we look at these changes together.
Thank you, Kellye. As the dean of another public law school, access to the legal profession is one of our primary missions, particularly for those who have not traditionally had access. So our incoming class is 23% first generation college, and it's almost 75% first generation professional. And that's very important, not just to the law school, but to the state. And the state it is not afraid to tell me that the reason this access is important is because they want new generations to foster the rule of law in the state and the nation, but they also want to spur the economic development of the state by having a favorable environment for innovation. And that's where the interdisciplinary problem-solving approach to legal education is vital, because if lawyers just stick to the legal issues, they're not going to help spur the economic development of the state. Instead, they could be seen as impediments of that. So, with respect to employment, I think finally getting over the stigma of the JD Advantage job, valuing all post-graduation employment the same, thinking about in-house jobs as just as valuable as law firm jobs, or legal operation jobs as just as valuable. And of course, looking at the full range of public interest jobs, not just the direct services, but ways that we could scale up access to legal services for the broader community. So those are just a few ways that I would tie it to employment outcomes.
Good, very good. Thank you. And we're certainly seeing, when we focus on helping people understand the opportunity of studying law, that's not limited just to a JD, that there's wide interest for legal education more broadly from the public. And I think that also supports that. And indeed, you know, remembering that so many of the skills that we teach in law school, incredibly important, that critical thinking, that creative problem solving for all those areas that you mentioned. Dean Nelson, let me go to you for any comments that you want to make about what Laura and I have talked about with employment, or just other topics that you want to make sure we raise today.
Sure, and I want to emphasize what you just said, Kellye, about lawyers being professional problem solvers, right? And a crucial part of so many teams, whether that's in business or media or arts or whatever that might be. And, you know, when I was at American, we started a master's in legal studies, right? And hybrid, thankfully, largely online. But I want to just center a foundational thought that sometimes gets lost, because we as faculty members are so passionate about our scholarship and our own sort of particular endeavors around our research, which is to say we have to continue to make the value add proposition as enhancing the students' career trajectories. So in everything we do, you know, sometimes it's a basic reminder, but, you know, often we have little possibilities around basically pseudo nonprofits, or, you know, things that are in the school, entities that are in the school but adjacent to the curriculum in the center. And we have to continue to beg the question with each of those very important endeavors: how is this supporting, enhancing the student outcomes, right? Are students involved? Are students centered in these initiatives? I mean, we promote these initiatives and we're supporting our faculty, but especially when schools are not all giving back fees and tuitions, and there's this very robust conversation during the pandemic, it's got to start with the students. And I think that also connects to the last thing I'll say, which is to Bill's points around sort of the organizational behavior. I remember when I was taking my undergrad course, I had this program on administration, and it was a co-op. And one of the courses that I don't think I valued as much as I should have was organizational behavior. And if anything that we've seen with the pandemic, we have seen as well that organizational efficiency, organizational high functioning as opposed to like dysfunction, and trying to improve how we work in service of the students has to be a part of how we support our talent pool and our human resources, or else we're not going to get the work done. So I just want to also reflect that internal focus as well.
No, it's really key. I thought the other day, I was thinking, you know, leadership education and change management would have been the two leading things that, you know, right now we may need, right? Absolutely.
Right.
We have just, I think, about 3 minutes left, but I want to make sure Dean Bobinski and also Professor Henderson have an opportunity for a quick closing comment. So Dean Bobinski, let me go to you next.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate the comments of my fellow deans, and I'll just pick up one theme quickly, which is what is our responsibility? What is the responsibility of law schools, and what role do we play in society? And the importance of legal knowledge in a wide variety of contexts, both within traditional practice of law and in many other settings. And just as Kellye, as you've talked about, the high interest in law and legal education right now, so many students seeing the fundamental importance of law across our society. And so I think for me and my colleagues, we have those values and those goals in mind as we look at what the law school is trying to do. And we see, as other deans have said, just the incredible richness that comes from having faculty members who are working at the forefront of developing the law, changing the law in different areas, being able to work closely with students in those areas. Thinking about interdisciplinary education programs like our Tiger program, where we put students together with entrepreneurs and business people to try and think about how to take innovation, to market. And as we think about the importance of social justice and providing opportunities for our students to work in those areas. So essentially, law schools play this transformational role in students' lives and in our society. And I think I've been honored to be a part of a panel with all the deans kind of reflecting those values today. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean, and really glad that you joined us and that you're leading the law school there at Emory now. Professor Henderson, I got to come back to you. You're a professor at my alma mater, so a last, a final concluding comment from you, and then I'll close our program today.
Thanks very much, Kellye. I've heard some wonderful comments from these illustrious deans. I echo this high interest in law. Law is really how we're going to kind of unravel these things that have been happened in 2020 with the rule of law under siege, climate change, pandemic, all sorts of things here. I think that all the good ideas have been covered here today. We're going to need some leadership and we're going to need some change management. It's really about us coming together as a profession. Never before have I felt that professional ideals have been more important than they are today. We got to live our values. Absolutely. Now's the time. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us. I also thank Dean Camille Nelson from Hawaii, Dean Laura Rosenbury from Florida, again, Dean Bobinski from Emory. Thank you so much. It makes me want to go back to law school when I think about all of you being deans. So please know that we appreciate all of your leadership, and Ken and I really appreciate you being with us for the Live with Kellye and Ken show. We're going to keep every month bringing important topics up for discussion, whether focused today like we did on legal education itself or looking out to candidates to help them navigate their journey. So Ken Randall, Kellye Testy, we really appreciate you being with us. So keep well and join us again. Thank you. Thank you.